My husband said, "That fat woman disgusts me." The word struck me like a slap across the face, though we were sitting quietly at a cafe, sipping our coffees. I froze mid-motion, my hand hovering over my cup, unsure if I should reply, ask him to explain, or just pretend I didn't hear. I chose the last. I stared down at the foam, tracing imaginary patterns with my fingertip, letting the words settle like a stone in my chest. It wasn't the first time he had made a passing comment like that, though those had usually been in hushed tones or about someone on television. This one, loud and sharp, aimed at a stranger passing by, felt different. Cruel, deliberate, unfiltered. I said nothing. I smiled faintly, gave a polite laugh when he made a joke about the weather, and tried to carry on as though my heart weren't breaking in slow, silent fragments. But inside I was already plotting not revenge. Not exactly, but a way to make him understand. To hold a mirror to the casual cruelty he tossed around so carelessly. That night, I lay awake in bed next to him, listening to his steady breathing. He didn't seem to notice my tension. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over. That fat woman disgusts me. It wasn't about her, I realized. It was about his small prejudices, his unexamined judgments, his sense of superiority. And somehow, I knew I had to make him confront that, gently but unmistakably. The next morning, I brewed strong coffee, letting the aroma fill the kitchen. He walked in, his usual confident self, humming a tune I didn't recognize. "Morning," he said, flashing a grin. I returned it with a faint smile, all the while noting the ease with which he moved, the casual authority in his gestures. It irritated me. It reminded me how unchallenged he often was. I decided I would change that. I started small, observing him in social situations, at work events, even casual gatherings with friends. He was always polite on the surface, charming even, but underneath, there was a streak of judgment I had never fully recognized until now. Subtle remarks about appearances, weight, fashion choices, even voices. It was a running commentary that no one, including him, seemed to notice. I began cataloging these moments, mentally filing them away, imagining a day when he might confront them himself. A week later, I decided it was time for the first step of the plan. I went shopping. Not casually, not aimlessly, but with purpose. I looked for something bold, dramatic, unmistakable. I tried on outfits that made me feel powerful in a way I hadn't before, fitted dresses that hugged curves I had learned to appreciate, striking colors that demanded attention, heels that altered not just my height, but my stance. In front of the mirror at home, I twirled, smiling at the reflection. I looked different, not just physically, but in energy. Confidence radiated from me in a subtle, undeniable way. I realized with a thrill that I didn't need his validation to feel powerful, to feel desirable, to feel alive. And that thought alone was intoxicating. The evening of the dinner party arrived. Friends mingled, the room buzzing with laughter and chatter, and he entered, radiating his usual confidence, ready to charm, to dominate the social energy as he always did. I felt the shift immediately when he caught sight of me. A flicker of something, surprise, hesitation, maybe admiration, crossed his face. I said nothing, just smiled politely, letting the moment linger, watching him adjust without even realizing it. I spoke with ease, laughed at the right moments, made sharp but playful observations, and noticed him studying me in ways he hadn't before. He was confused, slightly off balance. It was subtle, but it was enough. That night, I realized the power of presence, of letting someone see a version of you they hadn't anticipated. After the party, as we walked home under streetlights that cast long shadows across the pavement, he reached for my hand. "You look different tonight," he said, hesitant, testing the waters. I let the word hang between us. Different, I echoed softly, letting him fill in the rest himself. He didn't press further, but I could feel the cogs in his mind turning in the following weeks. I continued my subtle experiment. I invited him to social events I had previously avoided, where shallow judgments were more likely to surface. I watched him interact, noting small changes. He paused before speaking, considered his words more carefully, even questioned himself. He was learning, without me saying a single word. At home, I changed too. I stopped laughing at every joke, stopped immediately agreeing with him. I asked questions that required thought, not rehearsed answers. I noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he hesitated mid-sentence, realizing for the first time that his words carried weight. One afternoon, we hosted a lunch for his colleagues. Conversation flowed around the table, light and casual. Someone made a joke at a co-worker's expense, a remark about weight, and I caught him tensing. I met his eyes, just for a moment, and he seemed to hesitate, an internal struggle flickering across his face. He didn't respond, didn't laugh, didn't join in. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing the seed of awareness had been planted. Weeks became months. I could see the subtle shift in him, the way he observed others, the way he approached conversations differently. Sometimes he slipped, and I could feel the old judgment creeping back. But these moments became opportunities, silent reminders of what we were both learning. I no longer felt hurt immediately. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Change was happening. One evening, we sat together watching a movie. The room dimly lit, the quiet hum of the city outside our window. I've been thinking about what you said, he murmured, hesitating. I raised an eyebrow, pretending ignorance. Not about the movie, he clarified, nervously squeezing my hand. About us. About me. I realized I've been careless with words. Thoughtless. I didn't mean to hurt you. Relief washed over me, mixed with satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about acknowledgement, about awareness, about realizing that words had consequences. I know, I said softly, leaning against him. And I've noticed you're trying. That's what matters. The months that followed were a study in subtlety. We didn't magically become perfect. Arguments still flared, tension still built, but the edge of cruelty, the careless dismissal, had softened. Our interactions deepened. He asked more questions about my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences. He started noticing things he hadn't before. The nuances in my tone, the depth of my interests, the quiet ways I navigated the world. I began to notice myself too. I had grown into a version of myself that didn't rely on validation from anyone, even him. I recognized my own strength, my capacity to influence without confrontation, to teach without raising my voice. And in that, I found freedom. Social events became exercises in observation, opportunities to test subtle lessons. One evening, a friend made a cruel joke at someone else's expense, about appearance, about weight. I watched him catch himself, hesitate, choose words carefully. I could see the reflection of that moment, like watching a child learn to walk, faltering and adjusting, gaining awareness with each step. At work, I noticed the same change in myself. I spoke up more often, held my own in conversations where I would have once remained silent. I realized the quiet power of presence, the impact of being fully seen and fully unapologetic. And he noticed. That small recognition, unspoken yet palpable, shifted the dynamic in our marriage. We began traveling together more, exploring cities, attending exhibitions, walking streets lined with strangers whose judgments were fleeting yet revealing. He started asking questions, genuine ones about people, about their lives, their choices, their appearances, and why he felt the urge to judge. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to understand the ripple effect of careless words. Late one night, months after the cafe incident, I lay in bed next to him, the room silent except for the hum of the city. I reflected on the journey we had taken from that sharp, painful comment to the quiet, steady awareness that had replaced it. I realized that my strength hadn't come from confrontation or anger, but from patience, from observation, from allowing him to confront himself. I had learned that silence, when wielded intentionally, could be louder than shouting. Reflection could be more potent than argument. And patience, carefully applied, could reshape even the harshest of judgments. By the next year, the echoes of his cruel words had faded. Not because I had forgotten them, but because their power had diminished. I had transformed their sting into insight, their pain into understanding, and in doing so, reshaped the dynamics of our relationship. Even now, years later, when we argue or disagree, there is a softness in our interactions, a recognition that words matter, that awareness matters, and that growth, slow and deliberate, is possible even in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes, I think back to that cafe, to that instant when his words landed like stones. I remember the shock, the sting, the helplessness, and I smile quietly, because that moment, as painful as it was, had set in motion a transformation I never could have imagined. I realized that growth isn't about punishment or forcing someone into understanding. It's about presence, reflection, and the quiet ways in which we can teach, guide, and transform, not through confrontation, but through experience. And in that realization, I discovered not only the resilience of my own heart, but the subtle, enduring power of patience.